Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to this installment of the 2014 Endurance Summit. My name is Manny Aragon of the Rolf Workshop Center for Structural Performance, and I got another juicy interview for you today, another great panelist. I'm going to try and not leave anything out here because he's got a bunch of several different areas that he's really focused on and then brought them together. And that's kind of the magic that we're going to talk about today, and I think you guys will appreciate. My guest today, Shihan Dan Ordoins, let's just go down the list. He started out early on in endurance sports as a runner, later moved to cycling, and then triathlon as a pro triathlete. Actually competed in the Ironman World Championships twice, once as a younger triathlete and once at age 40. He came back and requalified with a sub 10-hour race. So you're listening to somebody here who knows what they're talking about. He spent time in the military, in the 82nd Airborne. And I believe that's where he started cycling. We'll probably cover that as well. I met Dan back in the early 90s when I was spending a lot of time studying martial arts. He and I went to Japan for the first time together to go to the Hambu Dojo and study directly with the Grand Master, Hatsumi Sensei, with a teacher of ours, and spent a few years. Dan was in a different dojo, but we studied together at various different times, and at some point, I dropped off and decided to shelve the training because I had too much going on. But Dan continued on, and he's continued on and still training today. In addition to that, well, let's see. I mean, he's run a dojo for I don't know how many years. We'll probably have to ask him about that because that's a feat in itself. And then he's also certified in various different methods that feed the whole kind of what I call ancestral lifestyle, and I think he's kind of grown into that over the years. One of which is MoveNat, which is a type of movement. I'm going to butcher this, Dan, because I don't really know exactly what MoveNat is, but from videos I've seen, it looks really, really cool and fun. MoveNat, which is kind of natural movement, which is almost similar, I suppose, in a way to the natural movement of properly done martial arts, in a sense, and I'll ask him about that. He's trained in the superhuman performance method with Ben Greenfield, who we're also going to hear from in this interview series, and also studied nutrition. And we're going to talk more about that because today Dan's going to give you some tools for folks who are spending a lot of time and their main time in endurance training, but to find out how to really do this elegantly without destroying your body and to be as healthy as can be. And, the picture I'm going to post to Dan, you're going to see Dan's in incredible shape. He looks fabulous. He's just turned 50. So for a lot of you out there who are looking at right around that age, and you're going to look at yourself in the mirror and say, is this where I want to be right now? Am I at where I want to be, or do I want to be in a better position? And Dan's got some really good tools for doing that. So he's really living the lifestyle. And Dan, I got to hand it to you. I've learned a lot just from following your Facebook posts and pictures and exploits and advice and things like that. So thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, you're welcome. I appreciate you having me on here, Manny. We've been looking forward to this interview with you. I know we've been trying to catch up, so I appreciate you having me on here.
Sure, yeah, and it's been a few years, really. Aside from Facebook, it's been quite a number of years. I think I kind of curtailed my training back in 2003 or something like that. So it's been 10 years, really, since I've been training. So, wow, I mean, I don't know if I even covered all the different things that you've been up to since I last saw you, movement training, strength training, metabolic and nutritional training, amongst other things. Not to leave out all the Bujitsu training and martial arts, which seems to be, I suppose, a foundation, but maybe not. Maybe it's endurance sports. Can you talk a little bit about all the kind of the different things that you've done and how they've kind of come together so that you're, where you're at today?
Yeah, just hearing you kind of recap it makes it to me seem more than what I've done, So because I'm sitting here listening to all the things you're saying and saying, well, I guess I have done a lot. And I didn't realize it's all been kind of my chase and passion for optimal health and vitality and just kind of having a good time in life. I always kind of want to challenge myself and looking forward to the next thing. And I've always had this kind of a addiction to being healthy and finding a way to live a life of being healthy, but challenging myself and kind of addicted to the next thing, to the next adventure and or kind of biohacking the things that I do and taking my N equals 1 and pursuing that, finding what works, doesn't work. I've done things from being a raw vegan to now kind of a paleo-based kind of diet, and kind of been through a lot of things and just my own self trying to figure it out and what works best for me. Not that it always works best for everyone, but kind of what works best for me. So.
Yeah, no, that's what I found for the people who are really discovering new things. They're out there experimenting, basically on a daily basis. Okay, how is this working? How is that working? But one of the things that you mentioned that I think is it's really overlooked by a lot of people is, and I get this from your history and also from just knowing you and talking to you, is your sense of adventure and your quest for adventure, but also fun. It's got to be fun. And when it's fun, it's not work, is it? It's not like, oh, I got to eat this. Oh, I've got to eat that. It's kind of like, I wonder what'll happen if, it's like you just built an incredible little addition to your backyard. You've got, pull-up bars and all kinds of other stuff back there. What's going on in your backyard?
Yeah, I do. It's kind of been my philosophy is it's not about the workout. It's more like about the fun in. If you can make it fun, then you're kind of addicted to it, and it becomes what you do and not so much what you have to go out and do. It just becomes part of your natural daily habits of how you live. And in my backyard, I have a trampoline I set up, and I always tell people, I'm setting it up for the kids that come over and relatives and friends, but really it's there for me to go on and jump, and I go on there and jump on it every day. I put up a pull-up bar and balance beams and all kinds of things in my backyard. So if it's out there and I can just jump on it and do it, it makes it kind of fun. If there's a set of rings that are hanging from my back porch, I can be able to just jump on it in the morning and stretch out on it and do a few things. So it just kind of makes it fun to have those things around and be able to jump on and do any time. So I kind of make it a lifestyle as opposed to something I have to go out and do and become a workout and, something you don't look forward to because it's going to be, a daunting task, but more like it's just kind of what I do for fun. So, and I like it to be an adventure and a challenge. So I always kind of looking for the next chapter, so there is a stimulus of not getting bored and a rut of doing just one thing.
Yeah, true. And another thing that I notice is that it's like I'm building a gym, kind of a gym, not like a fancy gym, but a bit of a gym in my garage, because what I've realized is, I'd like to go to the gym, but it takes 10 minutes to drive there. It takes 10 minutes to drive back, and then that's 20 minutes already. But if, your kids are grown, but my kids aren't. And so if I'm at home and I'm cooking dinner and I'm helping a kid with homework, I can run out to my garage, which is like 2 steps out of my kitchen, and, do some pull-ups or, do a little exercise here or there and get it in so I can have a regular thing going, as opposed to, some people who, have the time to be able to block it out. But life gets busy, it gets busy. And I found that for me, that works really, really well. It seems like, if I had a backyard, which I don't, if I had a backyard, it'd be really cool to have little things set up, a little park course or something set up in the backyard. So you just run out and play, Now, I've seen you in trees and things like that. What do you do with trees?
I do like that part too. I call it the getting out of the zoo and using your environment as your workout or fun in type of place. So, I'll go on long walks, and if I see a tree, I'll climb it. Sometimes it drives my wife crazy because we'll be out just walking around any place, and I'll see something that looks interesting to climb or to go on. I'll just jump on it and do it. So it makes it fun and makes it so I'm just not out just for a walk. I can kind of explore my environment, and I call it greasing the groove, which I'm sure many people has heard that term, but it's a way of still moving my body in different ways and still training, but making it kind of a fun environment. So yeah, it's kind of cool. That way, even, and as you know, as our martial arts training, I'll even be in the supermarket, and if I feel like it, I'll do a couple rolls down the aisle. Sometimes people are watching, some people are not. Waiting in line, I might squat down, do the Asian squat just to kind of stretch out for a while. So it takes the boredom out of it, but yet applies it to my overall picture of training and living a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, that's a really big point, and if people haven't picked this up yet, listen a little more closely to when Dan's doing this stuff. I mean, he's living his life, and and there's time to stand in line, so he squats, or he's in the supermarket and he sneaks in a roll or two, or I might be in line, I might be balancing on one leg. I might not have the other leg high up in the air, but people around me may or may not be able to tell. Or those little lifestyle things are huge. Something I got the other day from reading something Ben Greenfield wrote, and I'm going to reference him because he like you does a lot of lifestyle stuff. Although I would say that he's a little more training focused, whereas it sounds to me like you've just really integrated this into your life, where you're just doing it all the time. So I want to give you props for that. But he was saying that, hey, he wears compression gear all day because he's basically standing all day long. He doesn't sit. And something that I remember hearing from Dean Karzan's, and people were saying, well, how do you build your endurance? He says, I never sit. I either lie down and sleep, or I'm standing, or walking, or moving. He's like, I never sit. And so the musculature is just, and the neurology is just like, it's constantly under a greater load. And the people who sit, they're basically anti-training almost. They're training themselves to sit. So I really like that you mentioned that. But tell me a little bit about MoveNet, because I'm curious about that. It sounds like it fits right in. But what is MoveNet, and what do you like about it?
Well, if I can back up just a little bit, because you alluded to something I think that's pretty important, is something I learned from Brad Kearns quite a while ago in my early days of triathlon training. Because I was fortunate enough for him to had moved up to the Sacramento area, and so I kind of was able to train with him and do a few things. And he stressed this importance of having key workouts, and I think that's important as far as training is. There is key workouts, especially for endurance training or strength training or whatever. But there's this key workouts that you plug into your training program. So it's kind of a loosely tied training program, but yet you have these key workouts that you hit upon, and everything else is kind of intuitive training. If it feels right to do it, then maybe that short run that you're going to go out and do becomes a nice long run, as opposed to I have to do 10 miles at that run. It becomes kind of an intuitive. Does it feel right in the moment or not? Is my body ready for it? Is it not? So that you're hitting on these key things, and that's kind of what I do too. Is I'll have certain strength workouts that I do, but everything else becomes play and intuitive type of training. So that I am doing this moving and training kind of all the time within my life, but it's intuitive so that it doesn't become so regimented that I don't look forward to it, or it's not the right workout for the right moment. It becomes the right workout or the right thing I need to do for my own training, because we're all different. We all kind of interact and have different stresses in our lives that play on our recovery and how we're doing in that moment. So it's hard to kind of fit us all in just one training aspect that needs to be. And once I learned that, it really opened my ways applying that in a lot of aspects of my life of how I do things. So it becomes, well, even within work, there's certain times that you need to get things done. Then after that, you look at it, well, what needs to be done in the moment as opposed to, what's regimented.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think that's really huge. That brings to mind also Chris McCormick, who you may remember or not. He's for those of you who are listening, I reference him a lot because people think what they may of Chris McCormick, but he's one of the winningest triathletes of all time. And he really talks about, and he stresses this, and I think this gets overlooked often, but this is something that you just mentioned. He listens to his body, and he'll modify a training on the spot if it doesn't feel right, or if it feels like he has more, and he says he's never ever gotten injured. Not once has he gotten injured where he's had to, take time off out of his training. So I think that's huge. That's really big. It's listening to your body. It's in my own training. Honestly, my schedule. I have a business. I have a family. There's a lot going on, and I find, like you mentioned, the regimented training is. It's been really a challenge, and there are trainings that I don't look forward to. So I've started to back off maybe of my aggressive goals a little bit and say, okay, this is more of like a marathon than it is a sprint, and I'm going to continue to get better as I go year to year, but I'm not going to burn myself out. I've got to enjoy this. I got into this for enjoyment. I'm going to enjoy this. So if there's a day where I'm not feeling on, I'll change what I'm doing. And I like what you say about that. And yet I also get how a regimented training program can produce perhaps some shorter term results that maybe the way I'm doing it, I might produce. But the goals are maybe a little different. So, but again, then you've raced the sub 10, Ironman. So that's pretty good. So what did you do for that?
The same approach is that I implemented key workouts that I needed to hit upon to progress, whether it was an over distance training day or intervals or a tempo run. But it wasn't like I'm going to go run every day. There was like 2 or 3 key workouts that I need to hit during the week for maybe a run or cycling and swimming. And those are the ones I geared everything around to make sure those key workouts were right. And so the other days that I wasn't doing nothing, if I felt like going for a nice trail run just to get out and run, and it felt right for the moment, then I would do it. If it didn't, if my legs were feeling a little fatigued, I'd probably take the day off and maybe go soak my legs in some ice or something like that. So that there was this progression within my training, but yet it left enough flexibility to kind of tune in and listen to my body, but really needed to be ready for those key workouts. So even now today, I still like to go out for a long run, but I don't do my long run every week. It might be every 3 weeks, and then I'll head out saying, well, I'll probably do an hour or so. And once I get into it, if it feels like I can do 3-hour run, I'll go for 3 hours. If it feels like it's only going to be, my legs are feeling stiff, I'm not feeling right, or the run doesn't feel right, I might be cut short an hour or less. So I kind of gauge it how I'm going to feel for that run when I step out. Because each workout I want to go into it feeling energized and ready for it, and I want to leave it feeling like, God, I could have done a little more. That felt really good, and it energized me to want more down the road as well. So I really don't always take it to where I'm just totally exhausted, I'm beat up, and God, do I want to do that again? I want to leave it so that I'm still hungry for more, be it there's progression within my training. So, and I used it to the extent in my own life personally as things too, not just in my training. There was, after our first trip to Japan that we did together, you feel that excitement and energizing effect of going and how exciting it was to go. And then, continue on. I've usually gone to Japan three or four times a year these last, 5-6 years. Mm-hmm. And my last trip to Japan, for some reason, it wasn't feeling that way. Each one still had felt that excitement of going every time. And I had my trip all lined up and the whole bit. And I actually got to the gate at the airport and was checking in, and something hit me. The stress of going was overweighing the stress of not going. And for some reason, it just didn't feel right to go in the moment. So I kind of checked in with myself and came to the realization, maybe this trip just isn't right for me at this moment. So, of course, I called up my wife and said, hey, babe, I might be coming home. She was like, okay. And I ended up walking away from the gate and heading home. And it actually felt liberating. It felt like, okay, it gave me another chance. It took that stress off of having to go. Because each time I want to go to Japan or do something, I want to feel good about it. I want to feel excited and energized. And so, that's kind of how I apply it in my own life with daily things to do too. So, and that was a big eye-opening for me. Is I didn't realize, sometimes you get so committed into something that you have to do it. Having my plane ticket and have everything booked, and it's a big trip, and having to be able to walk away from that. At first, it was kind of hard, but after I did do it, it felt like a big relief, and the stress was lifted off, and it gave me the thought, well, okay, now let's plan another trip when I'm feeling good and ready and energized to do it. So, kind of a way of applying it in your own life of everyday living things as well, as opposed to just your training. It becomes a whole kind of life approach to it.
Yeah, that's another big one, because a lot of people tend to just power through stuff, and then at some point they find themselves unhappy and drained, and just wondering what's next, and maybe feeling a little inadequate because they've just spent all their energy doing something that at some point they realized they were chasing something that wasn't as important as they thought it was. I'll share a little experience I had a couple of years ago. There's a race, or there used to be a race out in Castaic, which is kind of in the Grapevine area of California, and called Magic Mountain Man, and it's a pretty difficult half Ironman. It's in a hot time of the year. It usually runs in the 90s, and I remember I couldn't eat on the bike. And I couldn't drink on the bike. I didn't drink enough, didn't eat enough. So I was dehydrated and bonking, and I came off the bike. I made my bike time, plus minus 3 minutes or something, so I was pretty happy, because that was like 7,000 feet of elevation on that bike and terrible roads. So I was beat up, and I got into the run, and I'm running 12.5-minute miles. I mean, that's how fast I could go. And at mile 2, I said I need to walk. So I walked. I'll walk for a bit, and then I'll pick it up. And by mile 3, I was like, you know what? I'm done. I am not having a good time. This isn't like something that I feel like I need to push through. And then I spent the rest of it. It was a 2-loop course, so I had 6 miles, total to get back to the to be done with the race, basically. And so I thought about it the rest of the time as I walked back. I'd go back and forth, like, okay, am I done? Am I not done? And that was the hardest part, was deciding I'm done. And when I finally took off my time chip and handed it in, then I knew I was truly done. It was like you said, it was really liberating. It was like, you know what? That was not that would have been cool if I would have just powered through it, but I would have been spent. It wouldn't have been a good experience, and I'm glad that I did that. But it wasn't easy to do. And I'm glad I did it. I haven't done one since, but I've raced since. I haven't DNF since on purpose. But people do that. Again, Chris McCormick is another person that does that. If it's not right, he's in a race, he'll just pull out and say, you know what? It ain't my day. Today's not my day. I'm not into it. So,
yeah, I've done that myself with even the Hawaii Ironman. I remember the first time I raced it. It's one of those times when I was young and had a type A personality, and I had to do my best no matter what. And at the end of the race, I ended up in the hospital, cramped up, having to get shots to get out of there, and IVs to be rehydrated, and afterwards, you really don't get to spend time with your family and friends enjoying the moment, as opposed to the time when I was 40 and I did it, and I decided I wanted to go back and do it when I was 40. At that race, during the run, it dawned on me that, I'm not racing this for myself. I'm racing this an enjoyment with my family and friends as well. So I kind of shut it down a little bit. I said, how hard do I need to really run this? And I look forward to finishing it and still being able to do things afterwards and spend the excitement of the race with my friends and family, going back late at night, watching the last finishers come in. So I was kind of glad I was able to do that and tune in and say, look, you know, I want to enjoy the whole race experience. I want to race and do good, but I also want to enjoy it and not be laid up afterwards. So, you know, part of that is you're racing it to enjoy the experience as well. So, good points.
For sure, and you know, that's another thing I picked up from Art Devaney's book, or at least the one that I read. I think it's New Evolution Diet. And he talks about, and this is, I'll recap what I remember, which could be totally wrong, so you have to correct me if I get it wrong, but, you know, Art, at that time, and I know he's changed his training regimen a little now, but at that time, he was going to the gym a total of 50 minutes a week, so he might go in and do 10 or 15 minutes, you know, hard or whatever, or he might say, I've planned a gym day, but I'm not feeling it, so I'm going to go lie in a field and look at the clouds. And he talks about how that in itself is it's a rejuvenating experience. If he's feeling like he needs to do that, then there's some kind of nervous system and physiological effect of doing that benefits his recovery and his ability to then, you know, when he needs to do or feels the need to do an all-out, you know, interval or something like that, he can put that much more into it. So that really struck me when I read that, and I thought, you know what, this is some good advice. I need to get more of that in my life. What do you you know, you've been in the professional racing community and stuff. What do you see people doing out there, age groupers and professionals that you might do differently? Like, what are areas where you think they might be making some mistakes and they could benefit from doing things a little differently?
Gosh, I think looking at it from a whole lifestyle approach, I mean, there's so much to do. I know Ben Greenfield has this new book out, Beyond Training, and I'm probably about halfway through it. I haven't read the whole thing yet, but there's a lot of good stuff in there that apply to endurance sports. Because really, I mean, as far as most endurance athletes take it, it becomes damaging to their body. So there's a lot of things we have to do to mitigate that damage for having a quality of life and being able to do it as well. Because it is a bit of a compromise, I would think, to, you know, push your body to those limits, but yet, you know, being on the brink of, is it healthy or not? So, and I think it can be approached in a healthy way as long as you're taking care of yourself. You know, there's other things you can do. You know, you need to monitor how you're doing as well. And I'm kind of a big advocate of doing blood testing, doing lab works, you know, checking on your insides of not how you're doing on the outside, but how are you doing on the inside as well. So, you know, I do, you know, at least twice a year, sometimes quarterly, some blood work on myself just to see my inflammation levels, vitamin D, you know, hormone levels, thyroid, and things like that. But I think that's pretty important. And then tying it together with, just like you said with Art Devaney, you know, sometimes you need a break, sometimes you need to go out and just, you know, I'm a big fan of getting out on the earth, earthing, getting in the sun, cold thermogenesis, you know, all the things that kind of help mitigate the damage that you might do with endurance training. So that kind of needs to go hand in hand as opposed to just, you know, I got to get the miles in, you know, the training in. So all that kind of complements it and allows you, I think, to do and perform at a more optimal level than just putting in the training. So I think it needs to be looked at more of a lifestyle approach and all the things that can do it. Even this everyday stresses of life, you know, that can play a huge impact on your training and how you perform as well. So, and not always having to, and I go back to Ben Greenfield because he talks a lot about not always having to put in just the huge long miles and And my philosophy is, what's the minimum dose that you need to put in to get the maximum benefits out of it, as opposed to putting the maximum that you can put into it, trying to get something out of it. You know, I'll set up some training that I'm going to do, but I'll kind of start pulling things out. What's the minimum dose I can do to get the maximum result? Even with my lifting, because I like to do a little bit of strength regimen, and if I can get away with doing 2 sets of something of a few reps and still get the strength gains that I want, as opposed to putting 10 sets of 12 reps in, something like that. I'll kind of back it off and what's the minimum dose I can get to get the best results. So I think a lot of times we get into this rut of I got to do more, do more. If I'm not improving, maybe I need to step it up. Well, maybe there's other things that need to be done to maximize your training load to get the benefit out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's one of my the coach on my team and another team member last year raced Ironman Mount Tremblant in Quebec, and it's a very, very hilly course. And they're family men. They don't have a lot of time to train. The coach has a little more time because he's a coach, but the other guy trained, I think it was like 7 hours a week, and they turned in, I think it was like 10 and change, which is for age groupers was a phenomenal time on that course. That kind of blew my mind. I went, wow, you could do that. Now, let's put this in perspective. Both guys were, they come from a cross-country running background. They've got extensive training and stuff like that. These aren't couch potatoes who did, 7 hours a week of training for a few months and suddenly turned in phenomenal performance. And I also want to point out that and correct me if I'm wrong here, you have a pretty physical lifestyle. Like the work that you do on a daily basis is fairly physical. You're up and around and moving and using your body as opposed to sitting for a living, like say a lawyer perhaps might sit. So,
right.
So I think that plays a massive role. Just that regular activity plays a massive role in fitness.
Yeah, I think it all counts. Everything we do on a daily basis, it all counts to, as far as our training. So, for someone that does a lot of walking or standing, just like you talked about, standing workstations or even people walking on treadmills while they're working, it all kind of counts and has an effect on either our stress load or the training effect that we're doing. So.
True. Now, from my time in the martial arts, one of the things that always struck me was, I'd always be studying from these older gentlemen who would be wiping the floor with the young guys. And I remember, Hatsumi Sensei, I haven't seen him in 10 years, but I do see him online. And he's still wiping the floor with guys. So how old is he now, 83?
Yeah, I think he is. Yeah, he's definitely an amazing guy. And his whole philosophy was always keep going. Keep doing it, and he still teaches 3 days a week, and I think what keeps him young and vibrant is that he's always doing what he's doing. He's not overdoing it, but he's always consistent with it. And the longer you're consistent with something,
he walks a lot too, doesn't he?
Yeah, I know he has. He goes out and walks. I think he has 3 or 4 dogs. He goes out and walks with them one time, and he talks about that's part of the training too, because the dogs are pulling in different directions, and go out and walk several miles a night,
Yeah, I had never really thought about that when I was training, but in retrospect, he's doing some really, like low-level aerobic conditioning. He's training the various different muscles because, the dogs are running in different directions, and he's got to control the dogs, and probably knowing him, he's probably over various terrain and just more of a, I read something recently. I can't remember where it was, but it was talking about how these days we're relatively weak compared to how we were, before we had all these kind of conveniences of life. We had to do everything, and even today, our fittest athletes would be considered weak in comparison and low performers in comparison to, ancestral man. Who had to, do everything with their hands and make things from scratch. And spent the day, searching for food and those types of things. So that constant activity, it seems like, and this is something I've also picked up from Ben, and then also from thinking about, like, what is it, how's Dan putting all this together? Because I thought about it. I thought, well, you've got a lot of different aspects, and how are you putting it all together? And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to include you, because in terms of living like a joyful and happy and productive and yet very fit lifestyle, it doesn't seem like you're really wanting for anything, like you have like this really nice, complete life, and and that's something that I think, a lot of people who are out there, again, just pounding their bodies on a regular basis are, I think there's also a lot of a macho aspect in triathlon, especially longer distance endurance, that people get into that for a lot of ego-based reasons. I'll go out on a limb here, flame me if you want, guys, but ego-based reasons. People go for the distance, and it makes them feel, like more hardcore or something like that. But then they're ruining their bodies in the process, which I don't think is very macho.
Yeah, I think there is this stigma of, like, how many miles you put in, But
right.
How about the opposite? A lot of times I'll try to look at things from the opposite. But how many little miles did I put in, but yet still race, and perform well? I think that has its bragging rights as well. How little bit of training I could do, but still keep up with, whoever I need to, or reach my goals, or progress in a race, and those sort of things. So,
you touched on something earlier that maybe you could speak a little more to, and you touched on the inflammation. You check yourself for inflammation on a regular basis, and that training can produce inflammation. And why are you so focused on inflammation? Like, what is it about inflammation that captures your focus? And then where are areas that you see in the lives of endurance athletes that they might be picking up or overdoing it and causing more inflammation?
Yeah, well, I think inflammation, like high sensitive CRP levels, it kind of is an indicator that something's going on in your body. Usually it's a response to something not going right. I mean, a low level and selective inflammation, say a bout of weighting lifts or a bout of lifting weights, you're going to have a little bit of inflammation, but how can you control that inflammation? It's more so that it's not a chronic inflammation, but more so as a selective and a practical approach to having it to create growth and repairs in your body. So I like to look at it like our environment is always producing some sort of inflammation. We just kind of live in an altered environment as opposed to living in an ancestral type of lifestyle we have in the past. So I think doing things to mitigate the inflammation that we have within our bodies and things like that goes a long ways just in our health and recovery, so that when we do our next bout of training or whatever, that we are not going from a chronic inflammation to more inflammation, but we're going from I would say a kind of a reset where we don't have a whole lot of inflammation going on, but yet when we do want to create it, it has a response of a recovery response that produces a better you, I guess. So looking at it from a diet approach and lifestyle, how we live, the things we interact with, and those sorts of things. So, I kind of gear my diet towards having what I would call a low inflammation diet of, I kind of eat for myself, and when I say this a lot, I don't always preach it to everyone else because it might not be a right fit for everyone, but for me, it's just kind of how I do things. Is I prescribe to like eating an epi-paleo, like what I'm sure you've heard of Jack Cruz online and what he does. So I've been, for myself, for the last 2-3 years, been eating a ketosis-based diet based on seafood and sea plant life and those sort of things, and trying to eat more of if I do eat a land-based animal, it's more of a grass-fed type of animal or beef and organic type of things. And I think that helps a lot, keeping the inflammation down in your body so that when you do have an inflammation response, it's not a chronic one. You're not going from a higher level of inflammation to another higher level. So, and I think it's a good indicator of what's going on in your body, and that's why testing is real important to see where you're at. So.
Yeah, and that's another key point. If you're for kind of the average public out there who isn't doing a lot of training, diet's going to be probably aside from the stress of life, diet's going to be probably the primary driver of inflammation for them. But for people who train, on top of that, if you're eating high carbohydrate, sugar, grain-based diet, all that stuff, is causing inflammation. And then you're going to train on top of that and cause more inflammation. I think that's where, you start to see, as you look in the age groups into the 50s, once you get past, 40 to 44 is the biggest age group, 45 to 49 is pretty big, 50 to 54 is a little smaller, and then 55 to 60, it's like it drops off a cliff. And, it's like, why are people stopping training? Well, most of them are injuring out. Most of them are having some kind of event where it's just they can't do it anymore. They've ruined their joints. And this is key. This is key. I mean, the other thing is when you look at people, when you're just looking aesthetically at pictures of people who are in really good shape, in order for you to be able to see the musculature on that level, like the bodybuilders or Art or yourself or Ben Greenfield or those guys, the inflammation level has to be low, because if it's not, there's going to be a layer of inflammatory fat and liquid covering everything. You just can't even see it. So I actually use visual markers as well. I know that lab testing is probably more exact, but on a daily basis, I'll use visual markers to see, okay, maybe what I ate yesterday it is causing some inflammation. I can see that, or that workout or whatever. And there's some good markers that, you can use with that as well, I think. But so I wanted to cover this because this is something that I know you for martial arts primarily, and recently, and correct me if I'm wrong here, recently you kind of stepped away from teaching. You've been teaching for many, many years, and why is that? Why did you step away from teaching, and what's next for you?
Well, a few reasons, I guess. One of them is that, I've always thought myself as a student. I've always gotten into the art because I like to learn to do it. And, after a while, I've kind of fell into this teaching role. And I think a lot of it was because I was coming back from Japan and showing some pretty cool stuff. And I was kind of getting a kick out of people wanting to learn it as well. And they were excited to see it. So it kind of was a natural progression of teaching it. If people were excited about learning it, well, heck, it'd be fun to show it. And I think lately I've kind of checked in again, because I often do that. I like to check in and see what's going to be in the next chapter for me, and what brings me that joy and happiness in training and doing things. So, and kind of in checking in that, and that was part of my leaving my trip to Japan behind and not going, because I needed to kind of do another self-evaluation. And it was that I got into the art to learn, and I really liked the training part. For myself, I like to train, whether it's endurance athletics, weightlifting, moving, martial arts. I'm a kind of a physical person where I like to get involved and be doing it, as opposed to always having to show. And I know that teaching martial arts is a way of learning it too, but for me, I wanted to just kind of check in and find that joy in just learning and doing it and practicing. And it's not that I'm totally stepping away from training. When I first walked away and told a lot of my students that that's what I was going to do, they thought I was just kind of giving up the art. I'm going, no, this is what I want you guys to do. I want you to go out and find out what makes you train, what makes you do it. I've always told them to go out and train with other people and experience it in different ways. Don't just come to the dojo here and think you're going to get it all, because you're not. There's so much more out there to get. And that's what I like to experience. I like to go out there and search for different answers and different ways of making it fit into my life and have fun with it. So that's part of it, kind of a new chapter in my life to explore it and do it and explore other things too. And it kind of gets me out of that regimen of having to do it every week and every day go out and teach. I like to break things up and do it more in a fractal way as opposed to having a daily regimen all the time. I mean, it's good to have a regimen that you do all the time, but I think it's also good to kind of break that up, find some joy in other things and other ways of doing it. So that was probably the biggest part of why I'm saying I'm not really doing the official teaching and having the dojo. It's more so just to find the inner passion and drive that ignites me to want to keep doing it. So, yeah.
Awesome. So I want to thank you for joining us today, Dan. I also want to encourage people to follow you on your Facebook page, because I found that you what you've been talking about, the kind of like experiential joy and the fun stuff that you're doing, and it really comes through on your page. And so, I would recommend people check it out, because if nothing else, you get a little inspiration. You'll see some of the fun, neat things that Dan's doing. But there's no way you could look at that page and not learn a lot. So thank you so much for joining us today, Dan. I appreciate you taking the time and sharing your lifestyle with us, because that's something I think that balance is just, it's like you bring balance to the conference in terms of, getting away from those regimented daily schedules and bringing in, what is the purpose of life? What is the kind of, a happy and joyful way and healthy way, when those all go together to live. So thanks again for joining us. And I've learned a lot, certainly, and I'm sure everybody else has.
Yeah, cool deal, man. Yeah, it was good hooking up with you, and I appreciate you bringing me on and talking. If anything, it's good just to talk with you. We haven't talked in a while, so it's great that we can hook up and stay friends after so many years of hooking up,
Awesome. Yeah, we still got to do that Escape from Alcatraz race, because that looks fun.
It does. I know. I haven't done that one. I've always wanted to do that one. So you and I are going to have to do that sometime for sure.
Awesome. Well, everybody, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm going to put the link to Dan's page up with this interview, so you can click on over and follow him. This is Manny Aragon signing out for the 2014 Endurance Summit, and thanks again. All the best.